with Jai Radhamadava. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Sadevaki Sarva Jagannivasa
Devaki Sarvajaganivasa.
Nivasa Bhuta Nitaram Nareje
Vasa Nitaram.
Bhojan Jagehe Gnisike Varudha Saraswati Gyana Kaleyata Sati Sadevaki Sarva Jagannivasa Nivasa Bhuta Nitaram Nareje Bhojan Jagehe Gnisike Varudha Saraswati Gyana Kaleyata Sati. Anybody?
Devaki Sarvajaganivasa.
Devaki Sarva Jagannivasa Nivasa Bhuta Nitaram Nareje
Nityakeva Rudha
Bhojandragehe Gnisikeva Rudha
Rastati Gyana Kaleyita
Saraswati Gyana Kaleyata Sati. Translation. Devaki then kept within herself the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the cause of all causes, the foundation of the entire cosmos. But because she was under arrest in the house of Kamsa, she was like the flames of a fire covered by the walls of a pot, or like a person who has knowledge but cannot distribute it to the world for the benefit of human society. Purport. In this verse, the word Jnana Kala is most significant. Knowledge is meant for distribution. Although there is already much scientific knowledge, whenever scientists or philosophers awaken to a particular type of knowledge, they try to distribute it throughout the world, for otherwise the knowledge gradually dries up and no one benefits from it. India has the knowledge of Bhagavad Gita, but unfortunately, for some reason or other, this sublime knowledge of the science of God was not distributed throughout the world, although it is meant for all of human society. Therefore, Krishna himself appeared as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and ordered all Indians to take up the cause of distributing the knowledge of Bhagavad Gita throughout the entire world. Yari Deka Tari Kaha Krishna Upadesh Amara Agyaya Guru Hoya Tara A Desh. Instruct everyone to follow the orders of Lord Sri Krishna as they are given in Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. In this way, become a spiritual master and try to liberate everyone in this land. Madhya Lila 7, 128. Although India has the sublime knowledge of Bhagavad Gita, Indians have not done their proper duty of distributing it. Now, therefore, the Krishna consciousness movement has been set up to distribute this knowledge as it is without distortion. Although previously there were attempts to distribute the knowledge of Bhagavad Gita, these attempts involved distortion and compromise with mundane knowledge. But now the Krishna consciousness movement, without mundane compromises, is distributing Bhagavad Gita as it is, and people are deriving the benefits of awakening to Krishna consciousness and becoming devotees of Lord Krishna. Therefore, the proper distribution of knowledge has begun, by which not only will the whole world benefit, but India's glory will be magnified in human society. Kamsa tried to arrest Krishna consciousness within his house, Bhojendra Gehe, with the result that Kamsa with all his opulences was later vanquished. Similarly, the real knowledge of Bhagavad Gita was being choked by unscrupulous Indian leaders, with the result that India's culture and knowledge of the Supreme were being lost. Now, however, because Krishna consciousness is spreading, the proper use of Bhagavad Gita is being attempted. Om Jnana Timanandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadhammayam Vedati Swapadantikam Vandeham Sri Guru Sri Yuta Padakamalam Sri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Sri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Harijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Sri Vishakam Cha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunnavadi Pastata Deshatarine Vanchakopaturubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivashadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So thank you everybody for tuning in. Before we got started, this Bhagavatam verse and purport inspired me to read a certain section of Prabhupada Lilamrita. which is in some ways non-different from the Bhagavatam, because it's the person Bhagava as opposed to the book Bhagava. So we're hearing a lot about the distribution of knowledge here and how it's absolutely required, especially the knowledge of India, so to speak. And so Prabhupada had a lot to say about this topic. So this is from Lilamrita, Volume 6, Chapter 1, entitled, Please Distribute Books. This is from a letter from Srila Prabhupada to his devotees in San Francisco. I have been receiving so many reports about how my disciples from the San Francisco temple cannot be surpassed by anyone in distributing my books. Sometimes they are selling as many as 70 Krishna books daily. So if this is true, then certainly when I return to the US, I must come and stay in your temple. By distributing my books profusely, you are giving me great encouragement to translate, and you are helping me to fulfill the order which Guru Maharaj gave me. So I am so much grateful to you, and I am sure Krishna will bless you 1,000,000 times over for doing this work. I hope that you and all my beloved disciples in San Francisco Temple are in strong health and jolly mood. Copies of this letter went out to every ISKCON center. Prabhupada had always given his blessings to all the devotees, but never before could anyone recall his saying a devotee would get Krishna's blessings 1,000,000 times over. Although a letter from Prabhupada usually instructed a specific devotee, the instruction often had universal application, and Srila Prabhupada's letters made clear his disciples' top priority, book distribution. I am very pleased to hear that you are increasing your book distribution of our books and magazines. This is a good sign that your preaching work is also strong. The more you increase your strength in preaching, the more you'll go on selling books. I want especially that my books be distributed widely. Prabhupada's ambition was to replace mundane literature with transcendental. At least in every home, there should be one piece of Krishna conscious literature, he reasoned. Because if a person read only one page, his life could be turned towards perfection. If 1% of the readers become devotees, he wrote, that will change the world. Whereas mail order advertisers were satisfied with a 5% response, Srila Prabhupada spoke of an even smaller percentage, 1%, whom he thought could become pure devotees in response to receiving a book. Lord Krishna also confirms this in Bhagavad Gita. Out of many thousands among men, one may endeavor for perfection, and of those who have achieved perfection, hardly one knows me in truth. To make the world Krishna conscious, therefore, would require that millions of pieces of transcendental literature be distributed. Srila Prabhupada wanted his disciples to understand why they should distribute his books. He instructed them through his letters. So before I start, I just want to offer my obeisances and ask the blessings of our senior devotees here, Arjuna Prabhu, Adipurush Prabhu, Vasudev Prabhu, Vajbihari Prabhu, and all the devotees present. Henry Prabhu, we go way back actually. I don't know if you remember me. I was with Danadar Swami as his servant, and we stayed at your house in DC back in like 2014 with Bhacharu Swami. So I have very fond memories of your hospitality, and thank you for taking care of us. So asking your blessings as well. Thank you. Sikshastika Prabhu, all the devotees, thank you very much. So the verse again is, Devaki then kept within herself the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the cause of all causes, the foundation of the entire cosmos. But because she was under arrest in the house of Kamsa, she was like the flames of a fire covered by the walls of a pot, or like a person who has knowledge but cannot distribute it to the world for the benefit of human society. So in the very first, or technically the second sentence of his purport, Prabhupada says, knowledge is meant for distribution. And that pretty much sums up the Sankirtan movement, because we know that from performing devotional service, especially hearing and chanting, then causeless knowledge comes. Vasudeva Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojita Janiyat Yashu Vairagyam Gyanam Chaidohitakam. Causeless knowledge and detachment from the world arise from this performance of devotional service. And so in reality, to distribute knowledge means not only to give books, but to give the process of devotional service to spread Lord Chaitanya's movement in the form of hearing and chanting. And the reason for this is because all suffering ultimately is a result of ignorance. We could see it especially magnified in the world today, that people are unaware of what will actually bring them happiness. And so instead of doing those things which actually give joy to the self, or even like on a basic level, just like provide some sense of comfort and stability, they instead engage in activities that only bring them more suffering, especially in regards to intoxication and engaging in all kinds of other forms of so-called enjoyment that in reality just bring more and more distress and dissatisfaction. I know Rahul Prabhu has a lot of experience with this. He's a paramedic, and so his job is picking up these kinds of people all the time who have made that choice. They've come under the illusion that doing a certain drug or engaging in a certain activity will bring them happiness, and then they wind up in the back of his truck and he's talking to them, making sure they're still breathing and stuff like that. So it's a widespread thing, actually, this ignorance, and we see the results of it, that people are just becoming more and more dissatisfied and having to resort to more and more extreme forms of sense gratification, but that only results in even further dissatisfaction. So it creates this perpetual cycle of suffering. And that's what we understand to be called samsara. So of course, it's not just a snapshot in this lifetime, but it's actually a perpetual motion of ever increasing suffering as the yugas progress. So people are locked into this cycle and they don't know how to get out. So how valuable it is then to distribute this knowledge that we've been so fortunate to come across. We understand that someone could be traveling through so many different bodies in the material universes for so many years and suffering unimaginable pains, right? I mean, we hear sometimes, I mean, even right now in Ukraine, people are losing their families, being ripped away, being blown up. I mean, anyone who's seen Saving Private Ryan, those war images are very gruesome and unfortunate, and all based on sense gratification for one reason or other. People are ending up in these horrible situations, being burned alive, lobsters being boiled alive, so many different circumstances in which there's extreme suffering. And so it's not just this one lifetime though, but because people are ignorant, they continue doing the same exact things that cause that suffering. And so then for millions of lifetimes, even more, billions, trillions of lifetimes, they're in these cycles of perpetual suffering. So how powerful it is then for someone to receive Srila Prabhupada's books, because as soon as someone does get a little prasadam or touches a book, even Prabhupada said, if one just touches a book, then their whole destiny is then forever changed. Anyone ever seen Back to the Future? They describe, going back to the future, there's like that break in the line, whereas normally this is like where they were heading, but then because they took the DeLorean back in the future, they wound up having like an offshoot off of that path and create a different destiny for themselves. And so that's what happens when someone gets one of Prabhupada's books or eats a little prasadam or hears the holy name. Their destiny is forever changed. And so instead of then having to endure countless more anadi, endless, beginningless suffering, they then take a detour and they start their progressive path towards achieving Krishna consciousness. Ultimately, because Lord Chaitanya came in this day of Brahma, they have the opportunity to attain something even higher, which is prema, or complete love for Krishna. So if you could imagine, it's actually impossible to imagine, but we're dealing with a situation in which people are right now experiencing the most intense suffering pretty much available to them in existence. We understand that there's also lower planets in which the suffering is magnified even more. And so people are having to deal with that. But if they just touch one of Prabhupada's books, if they receive a book, they hear the holy name, then suddenly that cycle is broken. And not only that, but they actually get the opportunity to achieve the highest bliss in a loving service relationship with Krishna. So it's a very incredible thing. It's not ordinary. we understand again, Lord Chaitanya comes in the day of Brahma. So that kind of relationship that's available to us is not available most of the time. But we see Lord Chaitanya is in this this mood of giving, almost like an avadut mood. Lord Nityananda is described in that way. He's an avadut, in which they're giving the most fallen people who have no qualification whatsoever the absolute highest thing, the highest realization of Krishna, the opportunity to enter into the most ecstatic, loving relationships with. So this is Lord Chaitanya's Sankirtan movement. He was in the embodiment of this principle that Prabhupada brings up here, this idea of knowledge being meant for distribution. And part of the reason why Prabhupada so emphasized this point throughout his whole life was because we understand that someone who's on the highest platform is paradukha dukhi, which means he experiences great suffering when he sees other people suffering. And so as a result, he dedicates his life to spreading this knowledge, because we know that ignorance is the source of all suffering. So there's different ways in which we can spread knowledge, but we understand the most powerful way is to distribute books and to distribute the holy name. Because as Prabhupada elucidated here, we could speak to somebody for a few minutes, but by our own limited potency, we're not able to completely turn their life by our own power alone. That's available through Srila Prabhupada's books, because we understand they're written by Krishna himself. Srila Prabhupada was especially empowered by Krishna to distribute this love of God. And so we understand book distribution to be one of the paramount, if not the most powerful way to break this cycle that people are perpetually in and engage them in a higher sense of enjoyment. And then also just by hearing the holy name, then people, that something can change in somebody's heart, because again, it's not from this material world, it's from a higher plane. And so these are two very powerful ways in which we can help people become Krishna conscious ultimately and relieve them of their suffering. So it's not that difficult. I find that I just had to make myself available in general, which oftentimes just means carrying a book with me, or being out there from time to time and having books available for people. And then it's quite amazing what can happen as a result of that. Srila Prabhupada once said that when one carries out the order of their spiritual master, then they're coming in contact with the internal potency of Krishna. Understand the internal potency means this loving energy of Krishna. So this is what we're all ultimately striving for, to be conduits and receptacles for that internal potency. And so by carrying out the order of Srila Prabhupada, which he gave many orders, but one of the paramount ones was to focus on this book distribution. He wanted all of his disciples to become expert in distributing books. Then we become available for these kinds of experiences that are extremely powerful and extremely faith-giving. And we can get a taste of what it's like to actually enter into that internal potency, that loving relationship with Krishna. When Lord Brahma first appeared in the shell of the universe, inside of it, it's half filled with water, and he was sitting on the lotus flower. There was nothing else available to him. So after some time of arduously searching for meaning in who he was and what his purpose was, he finally heard a voice, and it said two syllables, which was tapa, which means austerity or penance. And so the way in which Lord Brahma gained awareness of who he was and ultimately achieved perfection in carrying out his duty was through performing a little tapa, a little austerity or penance. And so we also understand from Bhagavatam this beautiful verse, Tapo divyam tapa, again this idea of tapa, Tapo divyam putrika yena satvam, sudyad yasmad dhamma saukyam tvanam tam, which means by performing austerity, especially this divine austerity, and one attains Brahma Saukyam, which means eternal spiritual happiness, which is transcendental to material sensations, otherwise known as material happiness, and continues forever. And so previously, sages meditated under the water for thousands of years, or stood in the middle of a fire, in the middle, like it's a circle of fire. They stood in the middle and again meditated for long periods of time. But nowadays, we don't have to do anything that intense. We simply have to engage in the Sankirtan movement, which is quite easy in comparison. It's almost too easy, one would think, to get the kind of thing that's available to us. But again, this is Lord Chaitanya's mood. He came to break open the storehouse of love of God and distribute its contents widely, profusely. And so for that reason, this is available to us just for the small price of performing Harinam Sankirtan, either through book distribution or through spreading the holy names publicly with kirtan. So we should be quite happy that it's not that difficult for us. The only difficulty is getting over that initial wall of, am I really gonna go out there and put myself out there and approach this person, and what if they reject me? But I find it's like a cold shower. And that, like, when you first turn on the cold water and you're thinking about getting in there, it's like, ooh, I definitely don't want to do that. This is going to be really bad. And thinking about all the reasons you shouldn't do it. And, oh, it's better for my circulation if I do hot first. And then, mind comes up with so many ideas as to why don't do the cold shower. And then you get in, it's like, ooh, it's kind of stings, and it's a little intense, and it's like a whole full body experience, and it's a little uncomfortable. Then a little time goes by and you start feeling like, oh, this is actually kind of nice, and I'm used to it now, and I know it's good for me, and so it's kind of enjoyable. And then by the time you get out, then you're like, oh my God, I feel amazing. I feel so refreshed and lucid and clear. And so I found Sankirtan was a lot like that. And first it's like, ooh, I definitely don't want to do that. And you start and it's like, oh, this is kind of difficult. But then once you get in the flow and again, you're in contact with that internal potency of Lord Chaitanya, then you start to get that empowerment and that feeling of I'm doing something for Prabhupada, for Lord Chaitanya. And with that comes a lot of deep satisfaction, that Brahma Saukyam. And then afterwards, it's like, you realize there's nothing else you could have ever possibly done that would have given you a better sense of fulfillment than to have engaged in that activity. So it's very important that we get that experience, because otherwise we're forced to try and get a semblance of that satisfaction elsewhere. But if we get it from the real thing, then we can get addicted to it, and then we can realize that actually this is the best kind of happiness, and I was missing out on it for so many millions of lifetimes, but now I found it, and I'm just going to try and live here as far as possible. And once you get that kind of little minute taste, then spiritual life becomes much easier. It provides a kind of fuel through which you can really propel yourself through difficult times, and it also gives you a sense of spiritual self-confidence, and that you know that you're doing something a little austere for Srila Prabhupada, for Lord Chaitanya. And we know that austerity is the wealth of the Brahmanas, and Brahmanas, they're like the happiest guys in the world because they're situated in the mode of goodness. And so for us too, we have access to that happiness. We just have to do a little tapa. And not only do we get happiness and faith from those experiences of going out, but Krishna also gives us experiences that are so faith-giving and so edifying and just so mind-blowing that you really are able to deepen your connection with Krishna and more fully dedicate your life to him. For example, I during COVID, we stopped our outdoor book distribution because it was an intense situation and it wouldn't have been practical to really continue on at that point. So we did it online. So we were calling people and messaging people on Facebook, and we found a lot of success distributing books like that. But once spring came around again, so COVID really hit, I think somewhere in like kind of like November. No, it was like more like December.
Anupam Prabhu,
Yes.
did you set up a robocall during COVID? How did you reach people out during COVID? How did you find them?
I just went down my contact list and called every single person on my contact list. And that was a big austerity because a lot of people I hadn't talked to in high school. And it was really awkward. But a lot of them took books. It was amazing. A lot of people. We did a lot of books like that. And
That's really cool, Prabhu. Really cool.
people were, yeah, a lot of people took multiple books. And from that too, a lot of people were like, oh man, I was looking for something like this. So yeah, when you jump in that cold water, a lot of times Krishna reciprocates in a big way. So we did that, and we were messaging people on Facebook, and we did a lot of books like that. So this is happening. We're doing the online distribution. COVID hit like in the dead of winter, and so we were doing that all throughout winter. And then once it started to get warmer out, we started to get that itch to go back in the park, because anybody who's gone to New York City in a summer day or spring day when it's nice out knows that the parks, especially Washington Square Park, are just totally packed with people. And so it's like the best opportunity for book distribution. And it's a little less austere than cold calling someone who you haven't spoken to in 8 years and seeing what they are interested in spiritual literatures. So we're thinking about going out again. And meanwhile, about maybe 4 or 5 months prior, right before COVID, this one boy had gotten a book in the subway station from some devotee. I believe it was an SSR, Science of Self-Realization. At the time, he picked it up and he was spiritual, so he kind of looked into it, but then he put it down because, he was into other different forms of spirituality, crystals and different kinds of meditation and stuff like that. And so he's going about his life. COVID happens, and then right during COVID is when Jahnavi released her music with Willow Smith. And he was really into Willow Smith. And so then once he heard that and he heard Jahnavi, then he started checking out Jahnavi's music. And then he said that once he heard Jahnavi's music, he realized that Krishna was the form of the divine that he wanted to worship. So this is like in springish time now, right around the time where we're itching back in the park. And so one fateful night after he has this realization, he says a prayer to Krishna. He's reading the book again, now that he's found out that Krishna is like his guy kind of thing. So he starts reading the book and he's hearing all about this association, that you need devotee association. It's powerful to have people around you who are practicing. So he didn't have anybody like that. So one fateful night, he says a prayer to Krishna that, please send me a spiritual friend or a spiritual teacher. And the very next day was the first day since COVID that we decided to go back into the park and do book distribution. So in Washington Square Park. He's from New Jersey, but for whatever reason, he decided to go to Washington Square Park that day. And he parked his car right there. He walks in, and mind you, there's nobody in the park because it's the height of COVID still. It's just us, masks and gloves, and like a few scragglers, or like anti-maskers who don't like the idea of like not being outside. So, but across the park, here comes this boy, and he sees across the park this big sign standing up, free meditation books. Then he comes over to the table, and he's like, "Oh, is this Krishna?" And I'm like, "Yeah, is that okay with you?" Because you never know what someone's idea of Krishna is. But he's like, "Yeah, like that's what I'm into." Like I'm like, "You're into Krishna? Wow!" So of course, give him some books, and I take his number, and so we start reading together and talking and getting intimate. And he's very intrigued. I connect him with Gorsharn. He's in Fordham College, good school, and studying music, and intelligent guy, but he decided he wanted to give that all up and just focus on Krishna consciousness. So then he moved into the Bhakti Center, became a brahmachari here, Gorshan, and now he's living in Houston Krishna House as a brahmachari there. And I actually just saw him. He was with me the whole week in El Paso, Texas, for this event we did there at Indrajumna Swami. And he's full-time devotee. He's now aspiring for Radhanath Swami. But it all started from that prayer he made. We just so happened, air quotes, to be in the park the next day. So these kinds of stories, that's just one of many stories of these incredible things that Krishna arranges. I could tell more, but we're running out of time. But the point is that by engaging in this activity that's so pleasing to Srila Prabhupada and is the emblem of Lord Chaitanya's movement, then we become somehow qualified, even though we're unqualified, at least I am. Somehow Krishna uses us in these extraordinary ways, even if we're struggling in our spiritual life in some way or otherwise completely unqualified. Still, Krishna, Lord Chaitanya, by his mercy, will inspire us with these experiences and give us this beautiful encouragement that what we're doing is extremely powerful and pleasing to him. So we encourage everybody to get involved with Lord Chaitanya's Sankirtan movement in some way, and most people already are, because there's all different kinds of ways to be involved in Lord Chaitanya's Sankirtan movement that don't just involve being out on the streets, but there's definitely a special taste that comes from being on the streets and putting yourself out there in some way, pushing the envelope that doesn't come from anywhere else. But otherwise, many people have been giving donations so that we can give books out more freely, especially to people who may not have any money on them. And so that's a big way in which people have been helping. And if anybody would be interested in contributing that way, then you could send a message in the chat. We could connect in some way as well. But I want to stop here and open it up for questions if anybody has any comments or things to say. Yes, Bhima Prabhu.
Stop sharing the screen.
Okay. Bhima Prabhu, please go ahead.
Sorry, Prabhu. Sorry. Wonderful, wonderful. There's nothing like, I was going to say war stories, but they're not war stories. They're just, days in the park, so to speak. Walk in the park for devotees like yourself. Do you have another like short one? There's a few devotees who are like, yeah, tell us another story. There's nothing like example to drive home the precept of taking that cold shower. I'm of approaching somebody and giving them that chance to touch a book or to read a couple lines. I remember when I first opened a Bhagavad Gita, my first visit to a Hare Krishna temple. It was actually Radhanath Swami's little cottage, his first preaching center way back. I opened it up to never was there a time when I did not exist, nor you, nor all these kings, nor in the future shall we ever cease to be. And I was devastated at that time. I was studying philosophy, fundamental philosophy 101. And we were studying the existentialists. So, the angst of the temporary, the absurdity of material nature, the absurdity of our lives, that in the far view, we actually mean nothing, materially speaking. So I was devastated by that. And just, I remember this great weight of mortality being taken off my back by reading one line. Do you have any other like short little stories? Because there's a lot of people that would like to hear that. Hare Krishna.
Okay, I'll give one quick one that just happened like last week. So I always try and have a book on me because you never know when someone might roll along who needs a book. But I was in a rush to get to the airport, and so I forgot to get one. And then by the time I remembered, I was already on the elevator down. But I knew if I went back, it'd be quite stressful, and I could miss my flight. And So I decided not to. And in that decision, I automatically understood that Krishna was going to fry me in some way because I didn't have a book on me. So I get in the airplane, and this guy sits next to me, old white guy, big beard, PhD, intelligent guy. And, most of the time people are kind of afraid to talk to other people like on flights and stuff. But I just said, hey, let me just try it out. And maybe he's, ripe fruit in disguise. And so we started talking and started getting very deep in conversation. And he asked me where I'm going. And I'm like, oh, we're doing this mantra music festival. And he's like, oh, I'm really into mantra music. I'm like, oh, wow, that's cool. And I started telling him how I have this friend who did this song with Will Smith's daughter. Her name's Johnny Harrison. He's like, oh, Johnny Harrison. Yeah, Like a River. It's like, I love her music. And he's like, you know her? And I'm like, yeah, she comes to the Bhakti center where I'm from all the time. And I was like starstruck at the fact that I know this is like a Dallas guy, white guy, like, just your typical professor. And we were talking about music and mantra music, talking more about spirituality. And he's like, yeah, I've been looking to get more into Bhakti lately. And I'm like, what? You want to get into Bhakti? I'm like, probably nobody else in the whole airport knows what Bhakti is. And I'm sitting next to this guy. And then it comes out that 30 years prior, he had gone to Radhakalachandji's restaurant in Dallas. And he saw a painting of Krishna feeding a cow on the wall. And he said he was so struck by that image that he remembers it to this day. And the idea that God could be like a friend and like somebody who could have like an intimate, loving relationship. And I'm just like freaking out at this point. Like we're just looking out the window and just being in awe of like how amazing Krishna is and like how he's real and like he's just orchestrating everything perfectly. So
Yep.
he's really into kirtan. Oh yes, Angelika.
Hare Krishna. Oh, this is such a beautiful class. Thank you so much for giving it and for being here and sharing your presence and so many of your stories. What just came to me, I wanted to share that is Sutapa Prabhu's classes, where he also shares many of his like beautiful, crazy miracles arranged by Lord Chaitanya on like book distribution. So I feel like there's so much correlation here, and I also just want to point out like this simple truth that there's so many miracles that happen in our everyday lives, especially when we are attempting to do devotional service, that we may not be aware of or we may not notice otherwise. And so that when you are sharing these things, it just simply shows how there's always divine arrangement happening in every single day that we just maybe pass by without knowing, and sometimes we actually notice. So that's all actually a very simple point, but thank you so much for sharing these, and I'm just so looking forward to hearing more because I'm sure you have so many more. And I also want to encourage you to write them down. Maybe you could share them in other ways. So thank you so much.
Thank you for your encouragement. Shikshashtika Prabhu, please go ahead.
Hare Krishna, Anupama. So my basis is, you were talking about how Nityananda and Lord Chaitanya were kind of like avadutas, and can you hear me?
Yes.
I was just reading about that in the Chaitanya Bhagavat, the origin of why they distributed their mercy to anyone. At that time, there were certain classes of people that were not considered eligible for devotional service, like Shudras and those less than Shudras, and even women, they were considered not to be eligible for devotional service. And so when Lord Chaitanya started exhibiting his pastimes, he first manifested his full glories to Nityananda Prabhu, and then he called Advaita, and he showed him his opulences. And Advaita, Lord Chaitanya asked him for a benediction. He commanded Advaita to ask for a benediction, and Advaita Prabhu said, "I want you to give all your mercy to those people that are not usually considered to be eligible for devotional service." And I just wrote something down. I quoted from the purport. of Chaitanya Bhagavat that Bhakti Siddhanta wrote. And it goes like this. After Lord Chaitanya commanded Advaita to ask for benediction, the Acharya requested that he deliver those who at that time were considered lowborn or less intelligent by giving them all knowledge and pure devotional service. That request was granted, except for those who were like envious of the Vaishnavas and who were too proud. Those people were not included in that benediction. But the following statement has come to pass. It says, this is from the 6th chapter of the Madhya Kanda in Chaitanya Bhagavat. And it goes, quote, even today, foolish people who are ignorant according to mundane considerations, that would include me, are capable of defeating learned scholars in every field of knowledge by the influence of their devotional service to the Lord. The degree of authority that they achieve in all fields of knowledge by the mercy of Sri Chaitanya, in spite of their being born in sinful, low-class families, is the prime evidence of the Lord's mercy.
Thank you. Yes, we're so fortunate. Prabhupada's, some could say, I think I heard Indra Swami say in the class recently, Prabhupada's even more merciful than they are. Even devotees committed offenses and rejected him in different ways, and he was always so willing to accept them back and engage them in Krishna's service. So that's why we say Prabhupada's the greatest personality who ever lived. Not only because he's a conduit of Lord Chaitanya's mercy, and Lord Chaitanya only comes once in a day of Brahma, but also because of his supreme mercy, his supremely merciful mood in engaging anyone and everyone in Krishna's service with no pretense whatsoever.
Even Srila Prabhupada himself said that he was like a recipient of that mercy because he could challenge any scientist, any great philosopher on the basis of and he didn't have any scientific background, but it doesn't matter because he could challenge anybody on the basis of the authority of the scriptures of Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra in our disciplic succession. So he was empowered in that way, and he's empowering all kinds of people that are born in, horrible situations from sinful backgrounds. We're all like less than Jagai and Madai in this age, but somehow or other he can lift us to the point where we can actually present the philosophy and convince people.
Anupama Prabhu, I really liked your poetic analogies. You were talking about being like a lobster, being boiled alive. Basically, that's our position here in this world. We're all lobsters being boiled alive. And then you were talking about this cold shower, stinging shower. So I was thinking of this contrasting analogy, how Krishna consciousness offers us a chance to get out of this boiling water and jump into the cold shower of Krishna consciousness. It's stinging in the beginning, but as you share it with others, like you were encouraging us this morning, then it gets really addictive, and you get the taste. You get the taste, and it's so cool and soothing, so pacifying, compared to this boiling water of material life. So thank you very much for bringing that up. And maybe this cold shower is what everybody is doing whose camera is off. I know Isabel was in the bathroom, in the shower, probably in the shower of Krishna consciousness. She had to keep her camera off. She didn't want to show her ecstasy. Maybe she was crying tears. I'm sure she was. It's just my stupid. Oh, she's driving. Hare Krishna, Isabel. Hare Krishna. Wonderful. Okay. Would anyone else like to contribute?
Hare Krishna, Anupama.
Go on.
Thank you. Oh, wait, was somebody else want to speak? Okay. I just wanted to thank you so much for class, and I wrote early on, this was the perfect verse for you. I don't think anybody else could have spoken on this verse quite as thoroughly and quite as movingly as you do. And I thank you for what you do, and because you were from the lineage of, I am one of those people that my husband and I were wandering through Washington Square Park years ago. It was the end of the Rath Yatra, and I sort of knew something was going on, and I had taken physical yoga at that point, and I'll never forget, we saw people singing and dancing, and my husband said, "These look like your kind of people." And somebody, as we do, danced over to me and handed me a Chant Me Happy book and a set of beads, and I put it in my bag, and I didn't read it for a long time. It's often the story, but
Jaya, who was that? Who was the dancing person?
I don't know. This was years ago. I wish I knew. I don't know, because we just kind of like taken aback by the whole thing, and
Okay.
so I mean, I'm sure it's someone I actually do know now, but I thank you for that cold shower, because that person just walked up to these two people in the park, and so here I am. So thank you so much for what you do and the lineage you represent of people taking that cold shower and giving out those books. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I'm just trying to, and failing often, but just trying to carry out the order of my spiritual master. And that's the only way I can make any progress in life whatsoever. So, oh, Angelica.
Hare Krishna. This is again, I want to share something I've been meditating on recently, and it's been, of course, shared so many times by our teachers, because it's such an important point, how we only can really advance through helping others, and that when one person struggles, it really affects others as well. And it's so easy to just like fall into jealousy and all these nasty things that are so unwanted in the heart, and such obstacles on the path of bhakti. And yesterday I was listening to Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj's lecture, and he shared quote, I mean, he said something about it, and I actually wrote a quote down, and I just want to share that because it felt like it's so important that I hear it again, and I also share it because it was so inspiring to me. So I'll just read it. As each one of us increases our devotion, it becomes easier for every devotee. Every time there is an acceleration in an individual's consciousness, it creates a greater support system to enhance the bhakti. Every time a devotee deviates, it creates more static in the culture of devotion. We can be better servants by bettering ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you.
Where is that quote from?
It's from Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj.
Beautiful.
Angel, you wanted to say something?
Yes,
Angel.
yes, yes. So, give me a second. I was doing something. When we are doing stuff, we take on different roles. Some of us are doctors and teachers, and we have different ways that we can maybe offer services to others. Offering book distribution is lovely, especially when we can put these two realities together. So my big occupation is being a mom. And recently, part of what we do is we give baskets of gifts to the children during equinox, which passed. So one of the things I got was this little book that is a children's book of the Gita. And it has beautiful pictures inside. If I can get one of them to show up. Hold on a second. And so I'm able to stick this in. I don't think it's going to show real well. I've been able to stick this in my son's gift basket. So here's one of these places where we're planting a little seed. And I'm thought of the verse in the Gita where Arjuna and Krishna are talking, and Krishna's going, don't think about, tomorrow what's going to happen. Don't think about yesterday. Think about now and what you're doing. We don't always have the opportunity to in our work, in our occupation, to give this type of information. It might be seen as rude, but there's sometimes little ways that we can lace them in. And, giving books to children is one of those ways. A gentleman that I'm involved with, he's regularly concerned about money. And I go to him, don't worry about money. He goes, why? And I go, whenever I need money, I know that it's going to be there. Krishna will make it happen. And he goes, how do you think like this? How can you plan like this? it's the same as planting a seed with a child. You don't know which way they're going to run with it. Something's going to happen though, so you have to have this faith.
Thank you. That's a good point. And I like how you're finding innovative ways to distribute books. We all have different services, but the fact always remains. I remember I saw a play when I was younger, and it stuck out to me this saying that where there is a will, there is a way. And we all may be in very different circumstances and different areas of life, but if we have that desire to distribute Prabhupada's books, then we'll be able to find a way in which we can. There's so many ways now, just by keeping a small book on you, you know that next time you bump into somebody and start a conversation, it turns out they're into meditation or yoga. Oh, here you go. And, you know, or little free libraries. There's those things all over the city and different places, these little boxes with books. You can just leave some in there. I mean, there's an infinite number of ways nowadays where you can do book distribution in a way that's comfortable and that suits whatever your circumstances are. So
it can be very delightful. Sometimes when you're giving out books, you don't find a stranger to bring into the community. You find another devotee. I was walking around down in Georgia in Little 5 Points, wonderful, wonderful art community. And there was a Hare Krishna devotee. And I go, oh, hi. And she gives me a book and I go, oh, I can't take that one. I have it already. And she's go, what? Because I wasn't dressed in a way that I would be noticeable. So this, of course, led to more conversation. And she's telling me about how vibrant the community is down there. And it can be delightful sometimes to not find someone to give a book to when you're trying to give books out as well.
Yeah, that's the fact remains, you know, if we're in that mood and we have that desire to please Lord Chaitanya and engage in his mission, then we will get reciprocated with in a big way. And,
Exactly.
we'll just be happy for all the time. There's one person who wrote this motivational. One person wrote this motivational book. It's called Happy for No Reason. And that's a kind of experience that devotees have who are engaged in Sankirtan movements, and they're just happy all the time for no reason, and they're unshakable. They have this kind of firm fixation in Krishna consciousness in some way, and that's because they're getting Lord Chaitanya's mercy.
Anupam, does one have to have bhakti to share bhakti with others? A quick question.
No, I mean, Jason already had bhakti to some extent, but I think one of the first activities he did was go out on book distribution with me, and he was giving books out to everybody. He was flagging people down, and by that activity, though, he became so fixed up, and by serving Adi Purush, he was so fixed up that now he's really got some strong bhakti going for him. And so, no, I mean, that's one of the first activities, especially back in the day, that people who joined would do is go on books. And yeah, it's by that act of giving that we grow. That's our philosophy, regardless of whatever status we may be to start.
So in other words, you get it by giving it, right? The more you give, the more you have it. If you don't give it, you don't have it, right?
That's how it goes. I mean, we're so hopeless in Kali Yuga, but Lord Chaitanya's mercy is there, and we get it by giving. So thank you, everybody.
Jai. Thank you, Anupam Prabhu, for giving bhakti to us today. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody, for contributing to this class. Thanks, Angel, for the questions. Angelica, a monkey, beautiful backdrop. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Drive safely.
Thank you so much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Take a cold shower. It's addictive. Hare Krishna. Don't get boiled. Get out of the soup. Hare Krishna. Come tomorrow.
Hare Krishna.